Also, we can start, no? It's 7 exactly.
Yes, I think we should start.
Yeah.
Let's start.
So I'll do a brief introduction about the speaker, and then you can probably take the participants to the house rules.
Yeah.
Okay. So welcome everyone. Good evening and welcome to everyone. Today's speaker is Professor Tamal Das. He's an international logistics and supply chain business leader with over 20 years of strong experience in managing and optimizing operations for Fortune 500 organizations. He has successfully led multicultural sales, business development, and operations team in India, Middle East, Southeast Asia, with over 30% of business growth year on year for Fortune 500 organizations like AP Moller Maersk Group and DHL Group. He has driven solution design, developed and implemented greenfield and brownfield supply chain turnaround projects for automotive, consumer electronics, healthcare, high-tech heavy engineering, luxury, FMCG, and retail industries. He also partners with global CEOs and CXOs in driving growth, optimizing value, and business ethics. He is instrumental in developing and leading high growth, multicultural teams globally, resulting in scaling operations, diversifying portfolio, and increasing shareholder value. Tamal is an MBA from Hult Graduate School of Business, Boston, USA. He is an engineering graduate and is an engineering graduate. He's an alumnus of the Executive Management Program of IIM Calcutta and the International Business and Leadership Program from Zurich University, Switzerland. Tamal is an active mentor and advisor to various consulting and faculty engagements in the field of higher education and industry forum in India and international markets. Shall we please welcome Tamal on board? And just before that, quickly, Professor Rahul Dige will take all the participants through the house rules, and then we will start the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Rajan. Welcome once again, Professor Tamal Das. It's a wonderful evening. It's great to have you here in this platform. I'm also particularly pleased to see a lot of our students who are in the supply chain management specialization. I see quite a few of them logged in here, so that's really nice. I will just spell out some rules for how this session will go. Mr. Das will take us through his presentation for about 35 to 40 minutes. And while that session is on, while he is talking, all of us will be on mute. You can post your questions in the Zoom chat window. And at the end of his talk, at the end of his formal presentation, I will repeat those questions to Mr. Das. And then at the end, we will have a closure. I think at the end, there should be a fairly interesting announcement from Professor Rajan as well. So please hold on. Thank you so much, and over to you, Mr. Das.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, Professor Rajan and Professor Rahul. Thank you. I will just display this. Is it visible on the screen?
Yes, we can see your presentation.
You can see my presentation, right? I have just turned on the video a little bit. I guess that should be if there is a bandwidth issue, then I will just try to sort of get out of that. But for now, I think we'll go ahead with this. Is that fine?
Yeah, I think for now we are good. If something starts, if the bandwidth starts acting up, I will let you know.
All right.
Let's go.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Thank you. Okay. Good evening, everybody. I think thank you for your participation in this on the evening, and it's lovely speaking to you all. So the topic that was we thought of putting across to you, everybody, is about an interesting organization. It's a Fortune 500 organization in the automotive sector, and how we look at and logistics being a very complex domain, and in this world where in an uncertain world where we need to ensure that this logistics plays an important role in running the wheels of the economy, as well as these organizations which are there here. As I see this, I would just briefly get into the details of each one of this. But just before, as Professor Rajan has already done the introduction, I would not get into that. So the agenda for this essentially is broadly divided into 5 different components, which is Volkswagen as a brand. Where does it stand? It's a brand that is making the world move. I would look at it from an Indian context. What is Volkswagen doing for the Indian market? It's the spirit of India versus the German excellence. We would look at the complex logistics processes that are there, and what was required, what was that spark that was required from couple of supply chain managers or business managers to turn around this logistics of this Volkswagen in India segment. What was the transformation? So with this 5 broad areas, I would cover this presentation, and I trust it should give a very fair idea about what was the transformation that happened. While Professor Rajan has already given a brief introduction, thank you for that. I think this was, having spent some time in this logistics industry and the education part of it. So let's just quickly dive into this. Volkswagen Group. There are 12 brands sitting here, and all are attractive brands. All these brands are what makes Volkswagen Group, the most sought after brand that we see in the world today. It's not just in India, it's not just in Europe, it's in North America, it's in the Asia Pacific region, it's across the world, where all these brands, some of them are market leaders, some of them tend to be leading in different segments across various categories. But nevertheless, most of these brands are familiar to us. Let's just move on to the next one. Volkswagen Asset Group. You can see the footprint. The blue-colored ones are the ones which are highlighted and where Volkswagen has its manufacturing facilities. And while Volkswagen is used even in Africa or even in Australia or even in Canada, but you'd see the manufacturing facilities of Volkswagen are in these countries, which are highlighted in blue. The last year's revenue for the Volkswagen Group was €250 billion. So that's a significant mind-boggling number in INR terms. In Indian rupees, that's 21,000 billion rupees. With a worldwide vehicle production of over 11 million units. At one point of time, Volkswagen Group was the largest producer, giving a serious competition to Toyota globally. It is still in that it still competes with Toyota in that number 1, number 2 in terms of the market share, and it continues to do that. What happens is that post that, over a period of time, this organization have been there since the World War II, and it has evolved. It has evolved from those World War II times into the 20th century, and they felt the need that India is a market where they definitely must be present. While they were present, physically, in terms of manufacturing units, they were present since 2001. But before that, they were definitely present where the automotive sector was being imported in from Germany into India. In 2001, they started off their plant in Aurangabad, and followed by their one of the largest plants in the Volkswagen portfolio in Pune, in Chakan. And that's if you look at the bottom right hand corner, that's the Chakan plant, which has a capacity of 120,000 units per year, and the Aurangabad plant has got a capacity of 80,000 units per year. So in India, together, it's about 200,000 units per year production capacity. And this caters to both the domestic demand as well as the international demand, both in terms of markets. While all the brands that you saw in the previous slide are not manufactured in India, some of them are imported into India, but the ones that gets manufactured are the very familiar brands that you see on the roads, or possibly some of you even own them, are the Pune plants. The Chakan plant, the largest of the plant, manufactures Polo, Vento, Amio, and the Rapid segment, and the premium segment of the group, that is the Skoda Octavia, Superb, and Tiguan, and the Audi segment is manufactured in Aurangabad, in the state of Maharashtra. Moving on, how does this happen? Now let's move to the next part of it, that is Germany to India. While we talked about the Indian spirit, we talked about how it happens in terms of the brands that are getting manufactured. There is a lot of complexity. The diagram, or rather the representation out over here, is pretty simple. It moves on from its original, the spare parts. The manufacturing facility happens here in India, but there are a lot of spare parts which gets imported in from Germany. Even though there are a lot of Make in India initiatives, and you have a lot of spares that get in sourced from local vendors, local suppliers in India, but then you'd have a significant portion of the parts, spare parts, and more specifically the engines, getting imported in from the original parts in Kassel in Germany. How it happens from there, it moves into Port of Rotterdam, from the Kassel OPC, Original Parts Center, to Rotterdam, and then it moves in by sea. Volkswagen uses Maersk in moving their containers. One of the main shipping lines that they move is Maersk, in addition to other shipping lines. It comes into Port of Rotterdam by road, and from there it moves in by sea and directly comes here through this into what is called as the JNPT port, or Jawaharlal Nehru Port Trust, in Nhava Sheva. Why Nhava Sheva? The Nhava Sheva is in Mumbai, and Pune is closer to that. So that's how the journey of the spare parts happens from Germany into India. Now, as I said earlier, it looks pretty simple, isn't it? If you look at the next slide, I think you look at the complexity of processes that happens once it moves in from the original part center in Kassel. It moves into Rotterdam in Netherlands. From there to JNPT port, which I explained in the previous slide. The complexity starts after that. If not the entire complexity, because there's a lot of complexity sitting here as well, but the majority part of the complexity is there in this particular slide. It's a busy slide, but I wanted to put this in one single slide because it talks about the 6 different processes that it goes through in moving the spare parts to the Volkswagen Chakan plant in Pune and to the Aurangabad plant. I will break this down into smaller parts in my subsequent slides. Okay. So the first 3 processes, let's look at only the Chakan plant. Let's look at how the logistics happens. Once it gets into the Nhava Sheva port, there are 3 different processes that are there, and this was an exercise. I'll just go back here. This was an exercise that some there were a lot of inefficiencies in the system, and that's where the bright sparks in Maersk and in Volkswagen Group sat together and came out with mapping this. We worked together with McKinsey and in mapping this entire thing together and providing a solution. I was fortunate enough to be part of this entire journey, right from its conceptualization to its implementation process with their German counterparts and the Indian counterparts. So coming back to this particular slide, so the first step, if I look at it, once it comes into JNPT port, that is the Jawaharlal Nehru port post-custom clearance, it moves by road and into a CFS. A CFS is a container freight station where it is a custom bonded facility where the containers, this is a containerized movement. It comes in by road and gets custom cleared in this facility. This is in Navasheva. This is closer. This is about 10 kilometers from the port. Once that is done, once the custom clearance is done out over there, because it is imported, you have to get the things custom clears and all documentation process is complete. Then it moves in by road to a non-bonded warehouse in Pune. So why non-bonded? Bonded is custom bond. Non-bonded is that it does not need to be go through a customs process. Post that, based on the requirements in the Volkswagen plant, a just-in-time delivery is done from this non-bonded warehouse into the Volkswagen plant. As we look at the second step, which was all these three steps are existing parallelly. They are not sequential, but they are simultaneous. The second process, the second step is that post Navasheva, it directly goes by road transportation and moves into a third-party inland container depot. These are for some of you who are not part of the supply chain background. Let me just tell you that very quickly about the difference between a CFS and an ICD. A CFS is a container freight station. Both are custom bonded facilities. CFS is closer to the sea or closer to the port, and ICD, inland container depot, as the name suggests, it's away from the port. Both are custom bonded facility. Most of the activities in both of them are same. It is just that this is inland, it is moving away from the port, and that is where this movement happens parallelly. And based on that requirement, it moved into the Volkswagen plant. There is a third process. So in the Navasheva, there is a container rail movement that happens. Again, these are the containers that are moving in by through Container Corporation of India, which is the largest government-owned, Indian rail-owned container operator in India. They move in on that and they move into this. They have the Container Corporation of India has their own ICD. From that ICD, post-custom clearance, it then moves into the Volkswagen plant in Pune. So, friends, it's like this. All three processes are happening at the same time in terms of the requirements. Some of the spare parts are moving by process 1. Some of the spares are moving by process 2. Some are moving by process 3. Anyway, the origin and the destination remains the same, but the three different processes that are happening. Now, let me break down the Aurangabad plant. Now, if I have to look at the Aurangabad plant operations, again, it's almost similar to that, but then Aurangabad being a little further, the step number 4 that is out over here is that it directly moves by road into the ICD in Aurangabad. This is not a Container Corporation ICD. This is a different ICD. From there, again, it moves by road into the Skoda plant in Aurangabad. Again, Skoda being the VW group company, it moves into the Skoda plant. The spare parts are different, and that's where the step number 4 is mentioned here. Step number 5, again, this is more of a stopgap arrangement, but that's what it happens. It moves from the JNPT port to the container freight station in Navasheva. From Navasheva, it moves to the non-bonded warehouse in Aurangabad, and from there it moves into the Skoda plant. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are 5 processes in between. The 6th one, if you look at it, it is again the container rail. It moves directly from there to the ICD in Aurangabad, and then it moves into the Skoda plant. So you would again see the origin and the destination. Origin in India, and the destination in India. There are 3 different processes, even for the Skoda plant movement. So in the previous slide, we saw three different processes for the VW movement, which for the manufacture of Polo, Vento, Amio, and Rapid. And Rapid, of course, is a Skoda brand, but it gets manufactured in Pune, but in the Chakan plant. But for the Skoda, there are three different processes again. Now the question comes is this mapping exercise that an extensive mapping, while it may look pretty simple on the slide, it took quite a lot of time to actually map this entire process, and we went into the details of this. Of course, due to considering the time frame, I would have to restrict myself to some of these slides, and possibly later, you are free to reach out to get further details. Even post the presentation, I would be more than happy to help you out. So this was the mapping that happened, and that's how the process was identified with various key stakeholders. Now let's move on to the transformation. What happened in considering various stakeholders that were involved, considering various processes that need to be re-engineered to get into that. The first transformation that happened in our plant was we eliminated one non-value added process. Out of the three processes that we had, we eliminated one of them. I mean, it was there was a lot of strategy, there was a lot of tactics, and there was a lot of transaction. So what I call that as an STT model, a strategy, tactic, and a transaction model. So all those three things were filtered together in terms of getting inputs from various stakeholders, and in subsequent slides I will share with you the number of various stakeholders. They were significant in that part. So we eliminated one process and we redefined the first process, that it will move by road post JNPT and then it will go into a captive. So as an organization, Maersk invested in infrastructure because there were a lot of customers that Maersk had in Pune's industrial belt. There were a lot of investments that were done, and an ICD was set up. A Maersk ICD was set up along with a non-bonded warehouse in Pune. So we are taking care of 2 or 3 processes separately in one process, and then it moves into the Volkswagen plant. So we are talking about this non-bonded warehouse post custom clearance. It got cleared here and it moved into within the same facility, within the same vicinity, and on a just-in-time basis, these were moved from here to the Volkswagen plant. The second process, this continued, was the Container Rail Corporation, because we could not change this. Simply, we could not change this because what we call, from a shipping, sometimes when a lot of ships come into the port, there's a lot of congestion that happens because the transportation is not there, because of the infrastructure that is not there. So it leads to a lot of congestion, but rail becomes an alternative that time. So in terms of congestion, the first process, what we understood, contributed to 95% of the movement post the first transformation, and the second transformation and the second process contributed to about 5% of this entire transformation, the volumes that moved. If I move on to the transformation that happened in the Aurangabad plant, so the first, we eliminated again there were 3 steps in this, so we eliminated one of them, and again, the step number 2 remains consistent, that if there is a congestion happening at the port with multiple ships appearing at the same time, and this happens over a period of time, during Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, based on the berthing schedule of the ships, there were a lot of congestion that happened that time, and the requirements was needed on the assembly line of a Skoda plant. We moved it through the rail, container rail, not containers moved out. But however, again, this contributed to roughly 5%, but this was about 95%. Earlier stage, when we saw step number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it was sort of spread out, and there was no visibility as to which process need to be sort of streamlined. So it moved from the road transportation into the ICD in Aurangabad, third-party non-bonded warehouse into the Škoda plant. From there, let's look at the business transformation that actually happened. And this is where the interesting thing comes. The entire 6-step process, friends, that you saw earlier slide, 6 steps got reduced into just 2. And this, there were a lot of in terms of investments that happened in between. And when I talk about investment, this is one of the investment that happened by the Maersk Group, which led to breaking down the entire thing into from this process remained the same on the left hand side, but once it entered here, it directly went into Pune. It did not wait in Navasheva. Just by road post, movement from the port directly, it moved here into the non-bonded facility, and it was broken up. So the entire inventory was stored in this warehouse. Everything in this ICD and in this warehouse for both the Volkswagen plant and the Škoda plant. Our reasoning was simple. If everything is coming in from this original part center in Kassel in Germany, why do they need to go the separate ways? So the containers that come in from here to here and from here, it needs to come to this route, and everything gets, post custom clearance. It is in this locality. It's in this ICD, and post that it comes over here, and then it gets distributed based on the JIT, the just-in-time deliveries that needs to be done either to a Volkswagen plant or to a Škoda plant. So we eliminated 5 processes in this entire strategy that a bright team of people actually envisaged, that that we need to get this thing moving, because a lot of exports were moving out of India in addition to the domestic demand. They closed down the Malaysia plant. They simply closed down the Malaysia plant because it was not making any sense for them, for Polo, for the VW group. They closed down the Mexico plant. And all the movement that happened. So the manufacturing happened out in India, and exports were going to Mexico, and all the Malaysia's domestic market, as the Southeast Asia, moved from Indian markets to the Southeast Asia. So that's where the change happened, and that's why it needed the change. Volkswagen plant operated in one shift when it started. And when this project was done, and this is a live project, when this was done, this essentially translated into just two steps. So let's just move to the next step. What was the outcome? I mean, before I go into the outcome, I think what's important and what were the various stakeholders, business stakeholders that were involved, was of course the first part. From a sales perspective, there was this sales that actually happened, the solution selling that happened to the CEO and the CXO level people of VW and Škoda Group, that this is something that is doable. This is something that can be done. It needed the commitment from the senior management of VW and the Škoda companies to ensure that this had to be done. So while the pitching was done by the logistics stakeholders, that's shipping lines, of course it was Maersk and other shipping lines, but then it was primarily Maersk who did it. Then there were multiple freight forwarders, custom house agents, and road transporters. But the entire initiative was led by the Maersk Group in putting together in front of the senior management of VW and Škoda for the solution selling. Once that got through, then came the strategy. What needed to be done? The business strategy part of it. Why, how, and why should it be done? So the question comes is, what should be done? Why, how, and what? Why it needed to be done? How and what needed to be done? All those things, we went into the drawing board, set up, spent endless time, in putting the sheets together, and multiple workshops in Germany, in India, and in Dubai, to get this entire thing together. And that's where the business strategy document was put together. And finally, the sponsors were the CEO and the CXOs of VW and Škoda, where we got a green light to go ahead and do this presentation. And it was approved as it was a sponsored project. Then comes the real thing about project management. A steering committee was formed for governance, because this was something which was, one, it was a prestigious project. Second, it involved not disrupting. When I say disrupting in a negative way, not to ensure that if the movements of the supply chain did not affect. While the current supply chain happened, we mapped and ensured that there was no disruption in work that happened, and the cars continued to be produced in both Chakan and Chakan Pune and the Aurangabad plants. So it was a hell of a project, that a project management that needed to be done and put together in through those where we could get those things in place. Post that came the operational planning. Once the that was one key part, and that's where the logistics came into the picture of both VW Skoda and the project managers of the respective logistics companies, and the execution process then started. What needed to be done and how it needed to be done. Why, of course, was addressed in the business strategy itself. And then the most important part of this entire process, the bedrock of this entire thing, was technology integration. It was extremely essential that even to the last road transporter, movement by road knew what was exactly happening when the pickup was done from the Rotterdam airport, so that the planning could be done. These are sensitive spare parts, so it could not be moved by any vehicle. It needed movement through what is called as an air suspension vehicle. So they needed to have an inventory of air suspension vehicles ready, so that when the ship comes in, berths in, we have them lined up outside the port gates. So as soon as that gets it gets loaded, it starts moving. So they needed to keep a lot of air suspension vehicles available in closer to the port. And that's why it was important that the technology integration, they got pre-alerts, they got post-alerts, every possible thing that was there that could be done in terms of technology integration that needed to be done. And that was what it was done very, very significantly in a very, very efficient manner that needed to be done. Once that thing was done, the pilot was carried out, and an overall the operational execution was done. And I'm happy to say that we did not have to run too many pilots. If you would have seen in my previous slides, we could see that we just had to do one pilot. The first transformation, what you could see in the previous slide, one transformation only, and post that. We could see this entire thing. It was planned out in a very precise manner in what needed to be done. And considering the fact the Germans are respected in their precision, in their accuracy, in their structure, it helped us make more sense. And since both the companies were European companies, that is Maersk being a Danish company and a Volkswagen being a German company, the cultural aspect of it also gelled well for this aspect to be put together. And countless nights were spent in putting these things together to turn around this particular project. So what we actually saw in this entire thing, and you could see a process of business transformation. There was a cross-functional transformation that happened. A transformation that happened from the procurement side, from the manufacturing, supply chain, the capital productivity perspective, services, and the product development. Now, each stakeholders in this matrix, or if I may say the hexagon that you're looking at, of these functions worked together parallelly without disrupting the existing supply chain that was already there. Because we did not want to do this. There was a lot of challenges before the project was actually finalized, because Volkswagen Group was pretty much clear that we did not want to ensure that no disruption in supply chain happens. So it was extremely critical that all the entire the cross-functional teams worked together, whether it was procurement in getting in multiple vendors, multiple suppliers put together, or whether it was the manufacturing part. I mean, this was an important part. Spares were being manufactured and supplied into the Kassel Center in Germany. From there, it needed to be coordinated together with the supply chain team. The supply chain team then needed to be coordinating with the services team and the new products that needed to be developed. So it was an extremely important area where all of them came together and put this plan in place. Now, well, of course, when this everything was successful, what we saw, the performance metrics, any business transformation, right hand side, any business performance, any business transformation comes with a lot of performance metrics measurement, and Germans are very, very specific about it. The first point, friends, is touch point reduction. When I say touch point, is multiple stakeholders. You can see the number of stakeholders that were there in the first part. If I can just go back to this particular slide, you can see the number of stakeholders sitting out over here. Their original parts center to Kassel in Germany was managed. The movement from there to the Rotterdam port was managed by multiple stakeholders. From there, from the port of Rotterdam to JNPT was again managed by multiple shipping lines. From the JNPT port to the multiple location was managed by multiple transporters, multiple ICDs, multiple CFS, multiple warehouses, Container Corporation of India. I mean, there were so many touch points. Now, each of these touch points needed to be broken down. If I can just go back to the last, in the performance metrics. So the first point that I'm talking about here, friends, is about touch point reduction. What we reduced was over a 50% reduction that we saw in the number of touch points, in the number of various stakeholders. That's a very, very important one, because if you're looking at a turnaround time reduction, we reduced it by over 35%. Now, this was extremely important because earlier there were multiple shipping lines that came in and there was chaos around. We did not know what needed to be done. It was just one organization that goes ahead and says that I will provide you an end-to-end solution. I will give you all the warehouse management. I will give you all the shipping services. I will do the CFS, ICD, clearance, forwarding, transportation, everything would be done. And this resulted in a lot of internal coordination, precise internal coordination that led to over 35% reduction in turnaround time. Inventory cost, well, that's a phenomenal one. I mean, that's a cost. I mean, even if you really look at it, that's something, multiple places storage, multiple places, coordination led to a lot of inventories and warehouse storage that was there. That led to over 30% reduction in inventory cost. I'm sharing you the percentages. I cannot share you the absolute numbers, but I'm sharing you the percentages. I think that should give you a very, very clear indication in terms of the inventory cost that we saved, and that's a big number. Raw material availability in just in time. When we got back into a single uniform platform, we talked about a 55% increase. That's a massive increase in JIT, in raw material availability that was there at any given point of time, because it was just a single source where it had to be taken. Earlier, there were multiple places. Employee productivity. While you had multiple stakeholders, here you have a single stakeholders. And it is not only, and when I'm talking about employee productivity, I'm talking about an employee productivity from the perspective of VW and Skoda, where multiple people involved in coordinating with multiple stakeholders. And that resulted in so much of chaos and confusion, which resulted to a lot of higher turnaround time, higher inventory cost, and higher areas. So employee productivity increased significantly for the VW and Skoda employees. Equipment downtime, well, of course, equipment downtime was you have all your port machineries, your RTGs or rubber-tired gantry cranes, your other equipments, reach stackers that were there, a part of all these facilities. Their downtime reduced by 20%. IT cost, well, that's something significant, because that being a big bedrock of the thing, we got a reduction of over 20% in IT cost. And one of the most important aspects, which I think we should remember, is the EHS. EHS is your employee health and safety incidents. Now, employee health and safety incidents are something which are very, very critical in any organization, be it a logistics organization, be it a manufacturing organization, or be it a services organization. Your employee health and safety incident is something that gets measured and are being taken very seriously. So your EHS incidents were reduced by over 50%, over 45%. Considering the fact that there was a single point of contact and everything was sort of managed so well that we saw the incident number reduce significantly. Well, I think that's the transformation that we saw, friends, from just boiled down to these two processes. And we not only had a success story, but we saw that this is something that happened, and this was replicated in other countries as well. So I think the reason why I'm telling all this to you, friends, as I understand what Professor Rajan and Professor Rahul has mentioned, that we have a lot of students, a lot of students and others as well, a part of this session, is the fact that you need to think across with bright, ideas, and this ideation process comes, and you can create real wonders. So I think I just want to end this particular presentation with one saying, which I like very much, and is that a ship is always safe at shore, but that's not what it's built for. You need to go out, take the challenges, and ensure that brighter things happen. You may fail, but then it's always a case that where you go, try out, and get the better things out of it. And that's what happened to this success story out over here in Volkswagen and Skoda. Thank you, friends. Thanks for listening. Over to you, Professor Rajan, Professor Rahul.
Thank you, Tamal. So we will take questions. I see a couple of questions already. First question is from Chandrakant. That is, why does Volkswagen or any other similar company not produce these original parts in the plant where they are actually consumed? So would that not benefit the business more? Is the question.
Sure. Okay, fine. Hey, hi, Chandrakant. Good evening. That's a very good question, Chandrakant. I think, see, there are two parts to this. You also have to understand, while a bulk of the parts are sourced in from India, and it has significantly increased from the time Volkswagen started in 2001 till 2020. It's almost 20 years. Earlier in 2001, 90% to 95% of these spares were imported in from Germany. Now in 2020, I would say a rough estimate that about 35 to 40% are imported in from Germany. So you'd see a significant an improvement, Chandrakant, that has happened in terms of from 2000 in the last 20 years. There are some parts that definitely need to be imported because it requires a lot of technology advancements, which is currently not available in India. And Volkswagen is pretty clear about their engines and certain spare parts where they said that it has to be of this particular specification. However, I think going ahead, the objective is to ensure that at least over 80 to 85% of them are sourced from India, and it's and 10 to 15 critical parts are sourced from outside. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm sure it does. So
Yeah.
the next question is from Sakib, that is not able to correlate the 45% reduction in EHS. How can we attribute it to the process? So isn't it independent of the logistics is the question.
Right. I think. Sorry, can I get the name of the
name of the person? Sakib Rafiq.
Hey, Shakib. Hi, good evening. It's a very good question, Shakib. In terms of EHS, every process, or see, let's look at our day-to-day process. Forget about the Volkswagen. Our day-to-day process when you are moving from, you are a student, right? I mean, if you are moving in from, suppose you're still moving in from your residence or from your hostel, you're moving into the campus. There are a lot of health and safety measures that need to be looked at. There are traffic signals in place. There are vehicles that you need to cross the road. You need to stop at the traffic signal. You need to cross the road. You need to pick up something on the way. These are all fraught with a lot of risks that are involved. If the traffic signal is not working properly, if you're crossing the road, some crazy guy decides to drive fast and not look at it while looking at the mobile, there are a lot of incidents that happen. Similarly, if I want to correlate that out over here in terms of the increase in efficiency or increase in the things, there were multiple stakeholders. In a container freight station, just to answer your question very, very quickly, is in a container freight station, when the containers come in post clearance, there are people just buzzing around. In good organizations like Maersk and shipping line organizations like Maersk, where their CFS, they own their own CFSs, they have a strict EHS policy, no walking when the vehicles are moving inside the container freight station, the CFS. So what happened was that earlier there were multiple such cross-functional storage areas where vehicles were moving in, where people were walking in, where it needed to be counted, the documentation needed to be matched. But in this particular facility, it was a very clear mandate. 0% people walking in the storage area when vehicles are moving into that storage locality. So definitely my incidents that happened reduced significantly. And same thing happened along the process of other processes that we saw.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah. So there are the other couple of questions are related to information technology. You mentioned about IT cost reduction. So the one question is, how did the IT costs sort of reduce? And then the second question is from Professor Alok, is what kind of IT systems are in use?
Okay, so in terms of IT reduction of cost, as I said earlier, there are multiple information technology platforms that were used because there were multiple providers. Now there was one single process which was not there. It was absolutely missing out over there. And this particular process was creating chaos among multiple stakeholders, and that's why I'm talking about employee productivity. IT investment in information technology, overall, where the Volkswagen and Skoda Group invested in multiple systems that were there across multiple stakeholders, reduced to a single system. And single system of Maersk, and to what Professor Alok asks, is Maersk partnered with IBM. Maersk partnered with IBM to develop what is a blockchain solution and other technology platform, what is called as trade lens, and this is something which is popular and has become a norm of the industry, where you have a single point of contact. In terms of right from the time it gets sourced in Kassel in Germany, in the original part center, right up to the destination. Everything gets monitored through the trade lens. Now, trade lens is a joint venture that was developed between IBM and Maersk in collaboration with them, that set the rules for the shipping industry. And this was passed on to the customers like Volkswagen, who can use it, and many other, not only in automotive sector, across sectors, healthcare, luxury, automotive, manufacturing, and all other sectors, engineering sectors, it was used. So yes, it moved into that single system from multiple systems.
Great. So one more question from Professor Padmalata is, how did you decide on the right mix of road and railways networks for the logistics purpose?
Right, Professor. I think. Thank you for the question, Professor. I think we spent quite a lot of time actually in trying to understand the right mix, Professor. What we did essentially was we understood that the post the mapping, we understood that there is a lot of repetitive work that is happening, and this repetitive work is in India leg of it. This repetitive work is not on the outside India leg of it. It was streamlined. However, Volkswagen, being Volkswagen, wanted to streamline this process. There were multiple things. There is no template to answer that question. However, what we did was, the simple reason why there is no template to answer that question is because there are too many uncertainties in India. When I say uncertainties, you would have the road mix. Suddenly, you would have a transporter strike. A transporter strike is driven by many factors. You would really not know. It is controlled by various political, non-political factors. So suddenly you would have ships berthing in, you don't have transporters to move. Then comes the question of rail. Again, it's a separate government entity because and Container Corporation of India is a government under India Ministry of Railways. It's a separate entity altogether. So when such congestion happens, when the strike happens, when there is disruption, happening in the road infrastructure, rail infrastructure that is there, we needed to ensure that multiple things happen. Our initial objective, what the VW and Skoda senior management, the CEOs and the CXOs wanted was to reduce that into one single process. We put our foot down and we said that, see, listen, 95% of your goods would move by this road, but there would still be that 5% in case of a congestion, in case of a strike, or in case of anything that would still continue to move on rail. It is something that would not move by road at all, just to have that continuity. That is to hedge the risks that are there in an Indian scenario. This risks, Professor Padmalata, may not be there in Germany, or even if it is there, it is very minimal, and it comes with an advance notice with a significant structure in place. In India, we are improving. It was in a very bad shape in 10 years back. Now it has significantly improved over a period of as we try to integrate things into the right perspective. But yeah, your point taken, Professor. I think the right mix took us a lot of time to convincing the senior stakeholders in VW, Volkswagen, that we needed to have the second one in place, because the initial brief to the company was we needed one process, no multiple process. But yes, 95% moves through the road and 5% by rail.
Great. So there are a couple other questions, and then I have a couple of my own. One is from Niaz Ahmed. How is the documentation handled with customs and ports for multiple way transport from the port?
Okay, so see, in terms of documentation, what we have is a freight forwarder. A freight forwarder is along with that, they have customs house agents. Now there are customs house agents. Now the Maersk being a global company, they have a set of freight forwarders. Their freight forwarder is Dampo. In fact, Dampo no longer exists. The Dampo was there when this project was there. They had their own teams who were doing the documentation part in Germany, and from there they used to relay that to their Indian counterparts, and the forwarders then used to tell the CHS, the customs house agents, to factor in the processes and get the documentation done. Earlier, the documentation was done by multiple people. Visibility was less, but moment it moved into this, the visibility increased significantly, and documentation process was easy. Yeah.
Okay, so I think the last question here is: was this transformational change? Did this actually lead to any sort of retrenchment or employee layoff type of actions?
Okay, so I'll tell you what. Volkswagen is a large group, and so is Maersk. Of course, Maersk facilitated the entire process, and I can tell you one thing for sure: there was no retrenchment at all. because everything what we did essentially was eliminate the external stakeholders that were creating inefficiency in the system. The external stakeholders that were not part of the Volkswagen group, definitely, I would not be able to comment what happened to them. But as far as the Volkswagen group or the merged group was concerned, there was no regulation at all.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions, and then our Dean, Captain Nagaraj, has one as well. So I will go first. So the first question I have is essentially the way I understand this, and I would request all the students who are from the supply chain specialization also maybe to chip in with their questions if they have any, and if they're not been answered, taken yet. So the first question is, it looks like the inventory was broken in two locations essentially before, in the before scenario, and then afterwards it was consolidated, and that is how you got the inventory reduction. Is that inventory cost reduction? Am I right in that?
Yes, absolutely. There were multiple locations, yes, in Aurangabad and in Pune that got reduced. Definitely, yes. Plus, there were multiple, the container freight station, then into warehouse. In fact, there were 4 different touch points for inventory that got reduced to just 1. That's where the inventory, got one single larger facility in Pune. That's where the inventory reduction happened. Yeah.
Okay, the second question I have is, can you shed a little more light on the JIT availability being going up so significantly?
Right. Okay. So once we moved the entire thing to post the transformation, post business transformation, and I myself have spent quite a lot of time in getting into this together with the McKinsey guys. Since it was a centralized place, we knew there was something called as a safety stock, and I'm sure the students would be doing that pretty well. The safety stock is, and it becomes more prudent, and Professor Rajan, I think that's a very, very, very good question that everybody talks about, that whether the safety stock should be up to a particular limit. If you look at in today's scenario, it's a big question whether you should really have higher safety stock, considering the disruption in supply chain that is happening post-COVID. But during a couple of years ago, when this thing happened, I think the safety stock was something that was kept at a bare minimum to the threshold limits, and what was required it was a 24/7 requirement, because earlier when they closed down the Malaysia facility, they closed down the Mexico facility, and everything moved into India. From 1 shift, the production increased to 3 shifts. We needed a 24/7 movement of spare parts from the Chakan plant into the Volkswagen plant, and also a movement into the Aurangabad plant. So that was something that was taken care of from that single location. Yes.
Okay, so there's a very good question from one of our students, Ganesh, that is, can Volkswagen or maybe even any other company rely on a container corporation or railways in times of JIT? I mean, how do the two go together?
Okay, so so I'll tell you what, a Container Corporation of India is an efficient organization, and I'm sure Indian Railways is also getting there. In my experience of having worked with the group, Maersk Group, and extensively, I have seen that how efficient Container Corporation is in terms of moving. It definitely works well. Specifically when there are challenges, ground level challenges that happens in that port area. Now the port area has become significantly good, but when this was there, when this transformation was taking place, it was not a really good infrastructure, and that's where Container Corporation of India was used significantly, specifically during certain period of time when road infrastructure was not good, or there was strike, or there was less availability of drivers of the vehicles, or the vehicles break down. So Container Corporation of India came to the help, and yes, they can be relied upon, and yes, they can be related to JIT during that particular frame of time, not not always. When the road transportation did not work well, Container Corporation of India moved in through the ships that came in, and it helped in providing the JIT deliveries only during that specific period of time. Yes.
Okay, so questions continue to come in. I think this has turned into a really interesting session. Siddhi has a question, one of our students again from our logistics and supply chain specialization. After the transformation, what are the possible risks that the organization has taken into consideration, and how has the organization sort of worked out a strategy to mitigate those risks?
Sure. I think that's a very good question in terms of post transformation risk mitigation. What was essentially done is that, a couple of points that you see in the transformation is that we needed to ensure maintain those levels. Definitely, EHS incident level was something which we needed to maintain to a significant level, and we ensured the right processes were put in place. The risk mitigation was taken care by what we call at regular toolbox meetings. Those toolbox meetings took place every at the beginning of each shift. And it was passed on to the next shift for those toolbox meetings, the real processes, and we saw that the incidents significantly reduced because of the conduction and monitoring of those toolbox meetings, risk mitigation. The other thing happened was, since there are a lot of equipments that are involved in movement of all this container spare parts, so this is a spare part logistics, so it is very heavy in equipments. We ensured that the equipment downtime was restricted to the way it was. We had what we called as CAPA. CAPA is corrective action and preventive action. Corrective action and preventive action was taken care, and a regular monitoring processes was taken in place to reduce the risks or to mitigate the risks that were foreseen, and it was taken to the next level. I think these are some of the two things. I think there were significant others, but these were two key things that risk mitigation was taken into account.
Okay, there is a question from Professor Rajan himself. That is, what are the challenges that a company like Volkswagen, as a brand in India, face, and how does it actually deal with these challenges? Maybe a little bit away from the supply chain topic, but very relevant for Volkswagen and the current times where the markets are turbulent regardless.
Right, Professor Rajan. I think so. Volkswagen, and it's not just with Volkswagen, Professor Rajan. I think it's with all the automotive sector. It has come into a bit of a recession even before COVID. The preceding 3 quarters of before COVID was bad for the automotive industry. The share prices tanked globally, as well as the companies that were listed in India. Share prices tanked big way. The consumption of automotive reduced significantly. However, the India is a land of promise. Under the, not only it was earlier, and it continues to be even more under the current circumstances. India is a land of huge promise, where you would see companies like Volkswagen, or the companies like Fiat, for example. You know what is the state of Fiat in India. It was a very good brand. It has just disappeared out of the blue. The last good model that you knew was Fiat Linea that came into picture, and post that, or an upgraded version of that, nothing came into. Yet Fiat continues to be present in India in a very big way in terms of the infrastructure is concerned. They'll not be producing because they're sure India will, the automotive industry would resurrect itself from its current state and get into the next level. So the immediate future looks bullish. The immediate future may not look bullish, but in the medium term, say about 3 to 4 quarters from now, the automotive sector is definitely going to look up, and India is being considered as the manufacturing hub of small and compact cars. And that is something what is going to continue to do. And with Make in India's focus post-COVID, I think that is going to gain momentum even more.
Okay, there's a question from Professor Shankar. perhaps the most senior most professor at our university. His question is about whether Volkswagen supply chain is a pull or a push-based system. That is it a dealer-based, dealer pull-based system, or is there forecasting and push-based system, that is a large-scale forecasting, and then you push the products that you have, so sales that you have forecasted.
Right. Thank you, Professor Shankar. Thank you for asking this question. I think it's a fantastic question, Professor Shankar. See, Volkswagen does not have the luxury like a Suzuki or a Hyundai. For someone like a Hyundai or a Suzuki, it would be a pull strategy. The dealers have the upper hand. But for someone like a Volkswagen or someone like a Daimler, Mercedes-Benz, it's always a push strategy. It's a push strategy that is there. While Volkswagen and the likes of BMW or Mercedes-Benz, they definitely are concerned about numbers, but then they are they are more quality conscious. I'm not saying Hyundai and Maruti are not quality conscious, but definitely VW are more are more focused on that. So I think it's for Volkswagen, it's a push strategy to the dealers. For Suzuki and Hyundai, it's a pull strategy.
Okay. About when it comes to storage capacity and managing the inventory in the warehouse, so how does any company, and specifically here, since you've dealt with Volkswagen, how does a company organize its sort of warehouse area for different kinds of bulk material? And has that changed post-COVID? So as you can see, I think the question is more sort of directed at what is the way companies are responding to these challenging times where there are people-to-people contact, etc., and in warehouses, and how's that sort of handled?
Sure. I'll tell you. I think. Thank you, Professor Rajan. Let me tell you, at Criticalog, I would of course not be sharing the name of the company, but then I'm working with an international player. We are doing into what is called as robos. We are partnering with robos for contactless movement. While the warehouses of the automotive plant are not like Amazon or a plant where you would have robots moving around. This is a completely different plant. And at Criticalog, we are partnering with one of those international robotic companies that are doing a robotic pickup, robotic delivery within the warehouse, and that's where the future is. Well, post-COVID, we would not see 100% robotics, but definitely a hybrid model where you would see a maturity from 20% robotics, 80% and 80% human interface post-COVID, which we foresee in the next 3 to 4 quarters, to maturing it to almost a 50-50 ratio of robotics versus and a human interface. That's how the warehouse storage is going to happen. Storage and movement within the warehouse is going to happen, and we are happy to say that at Criticalog India, I'm reiterating that we have partnered with one of the visionary companies that are going to do this for the automotive sector in India, and this would be replicated across sectors. And there is some good news that's coming up.
Okay, I think we are at the end of our session. We are well past 8 o'clock. Thank you so much for patiently answering all our questions. The last question will come from our captain, Dean Nagaraj. Participants, there is a link that is posted by Professor Rajan for collecting your certificate for participating in this session. So thank you very much for taking the time to participate. For participants, and Mr. Das, thank you so much for taking all these questions very patiently. For closure, I will hand this back to Professor Rajan. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Rajan. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Captain, can you please ask your question?
Yeah. Professor Das, good evening, and how are you doing?
Good evening, Captain. I'm doing good. How are you?
Good, fantastic.
Thank
you. So I just wanted to ask you, when we talk about just in time, it started with the shipping industry in Japan because of the scarcity of land, and it worked well. Um, uh, 2011 saw Fukushima, the earthquakes, tsunami, and the nuclear meltdown, which hit Toyota's supply chains very badly. It took them a good 2-3 years to restore. So when companies plan supply chain lines, do they take far out events like this, or they just treat them as force majeure and they happen once in a way?
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Captain, for asking this. And this question, Captain, is more prudent in today's scenario. I think the objective in today's scenario for not only the automotive supply chain but all other supply chains is essentially to de-link any, like, for example, there is always this demand to de-link COVID-19 from force majeure to a completely different segment altogether. But yes, the tendency that is there, because at Critical Org and in earlier organizations also, I've worked extensively with automotive players, and today we at Critical Org we do have a lot of automotive players in our portfolio. So I can confidently say that all these automotive companies that are there, whether it is auto ancillaries or it is auto OEMs, all of them are taking into consideration in the current scenario what is their supply chain planning that needs to be done, what is the disruption that needs to be done. Crisis management teams are being formed, cross-functional teams are being formed to ensure that a strategy is being developed, a short-term, medium-term, and a long-term strategy is being formed. Each of these automotive players or auto ancillaries or OEMs have been affected significantly, and each of them are devising, or rather have almost devised, their supply chain strategy, and we have been happy to help them in mitigating this. Yes, they have to begun the process, and that is going to be the new normal.
Thank you, Tamal. Yeah. Professor Rajan, all yours.
Yes, sir. So, thank you for the wonderful and insightful session, Mr. Das. I'm sure our executive MBA, our MBA students, our distinguished faculty, and other participants who have been part of this wonderful webinar have learned some immensely important points from today's session. We thank you immensely for your time and all the participants' time as well. And I wish you all a good evening, and we will all see you soon in the next webinar very soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor Rajan. Much appreciated.